Today we are dedicating this class in honor of the yard site of your father. And please continue sharing some memories, including about this beautiful picture of your father. And then we'll
So
learn some Torah in his memory,
yeah,
please.
my father was born in Bialystok in 1911. And this is a picture when he was, I guess, in high school, before he came to the United States. He is on the far right standing. So he's, as you can see, he's kind of short, which he always was his whole life. He was on the short
He didn't
side.
get any taller.
He didn't get much taller. That's true. And he's holding, it's not a trumpet. It's, I can't remember the name of the instrument. It's a form of a trumpet. But anyway, what I like about the picture is that his whole life he loved music, and he passed on that music, the love of music, to his children and his grandchildren. We all played an instrument at one point or another. He was a master of languages, and the Hebrew Gymnasium was a school in Bialystok that taught everything in Hebrew. So he was fluent in Hebrew. Of course, everybody spoke Yiddish in his community, but his parents spoke Hebrew to him. The Bialystok was the origin of the Habima Theater. And because Bialystok was sometimes Russian and sometimes Polish and sometimes German, he spoke those languages as well. And he became a translator in his as his career. He was a great Zionist, and he was a very good student of Judaica. So that's why I like this picture, because it has all of the kind of has all of those features of his personality. And if my sister wants to say anything in addition.
One of the things about my dad, well, not one of, as my sister said, he was a real intellectual. He got his PhD in linguistics at the age of 60. And he always said to me, please don't wait till you're 60. Unfortunately, I did not get my PhD, but my sister did. So that was good for him. But he seemed to me like a man of the world. Here was a boy who came here at 16, knowing all these languages, but not a word of English. And in the end, he became a man who not only was proficient in many languages, but he would read so many things that had nothing to do with his engineering and his translations and all the scientific stuff he did. He would read the Wall Street Journal, he would read the New Yorker, the Economist, and I always admired how this very, very bright young boy became a man of the world.
Agreed.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dorothy. Jen, any other final thoughts?
Yeah, just that he was also really skilled in the Talmud. And he went to Talmud classes his whole life. But he was recognized as someone who knew the Talmud very well. But he wasn't a great believer, but he was very traditional. It was kind of like an Israeli. I don't go to any shul, but although he did.
2 daughters married to 2 physicians.
He always went to an Orthodox congregation and only saw that as kind of the way to do it. But he wasn't so much of a believer, but he thought that was the right way to go. Yeah.
Excellent. So first source from Vayikra, please, Jane.
God spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I am giving you and you reap the harvest, you shall bring the omer of the first of your harvest to the Kohen. He shall wave the omer before God and be an appeasement for you. On the day following the Sabbath, the first day of Pesach, the Kohen shall wave it.
Excellent. I'll have you stay on for the next one, because even though they're a few verses apart, they're very connected. But essentially, God, who has just saved our people from Mitzrayim, and we're wandering in the desert, and God is feeding us and caring for us. And God says, when I give you the greatest gift, I give you your own land, this gift of the land of Israel, in order for you to show your gratitude. When you're farming and you're literally eating off the land, you wouldn't be there without God. So God says, when you harvest your crops that would not have grown without God's grace and love and kindness, give the first best of it, not all of it, just a little portion of it, as a way to not force, but make yourselves recognize that you should have gratitude for God in everything you do. And we do similar things to do when we say blessings before we eat certain food, and other religions have this as well, saying grace before meals. But this idea that we can make everything that is good, we can make it an opportunity for God consciousness. So that's the simple idea behind that. When you're gathering your grain, offer some to God. And this is also saying that this Omer offering, of this harvest offering, this barley offering, until you've offered it to God, you don't even have permission to eat of your crops. So again, it's very similar to blessings today. The custom, the law in Jewish law is to not eat something without recognizing God's role in it. But then they continue that during the harvest processing, there's a separate mitzvah. Go ahead, Jane, source number 2.
You should count for yourselves from the day after Shabbat, Pesach, from the day that you brought the Omer of the waving. 7 weeks they shall be complete. Until the day after the 7th week, you shall count 50 days, and you shall bring a new flour offering for God.
Excellent, thank you. So while we don't have the temple, the Beit HaMikdash today, so we're not making offerings in the temple, this independent mitzvah between Pesach and the holiday of Shavuot of counting the days in between is still kept today. There's a blessing on it. People, there's all laws around it, standing up, etc., like that. So it is still counted today. And the question is why? Why are we counting the days? Now, as is often with the Torah, it's not explained in context. However, the simplest understanding is probably that these men and women were out in the fields working very, very hard for the harvest season. And in order for them to keep track of time and make sure that they knew when Shavuot was coming, so they knew when they had to get to the temple, they would literally count the days. They would know, oh, it's such and such day. I have 3 days to finish harvesting and then get my offering to the temple. So that's a simple reason. Now, historically, we have begun to associate the holiday of Shavuot, which is coming in a few weeks, which was historically the end of the harvest season, with the giving of the Torah. And there are hints in the Torah that imply that the Torah might have actually been given on or around Shavuot. Regardless, we associate it with Shavuot. And so the rabbis have given new meaning to this counting. We're not counting up so we can keep track of the days for harvest and agricultural reasons. We're counting up because of our excitement at receiving the Torah. And the rabbis go back and forth. Well, if it's about excitement, shouldn't we be counting down the days? But they say, no, 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 no. Each of these days is us growing in holiness. And it's an anticipation where every moment on the journey is valuable in and of itself. It's not that, oh God, I want this time to be over, just give me the Torah already. It's, I am so excited that God gave us this opportunity to earn the Torah, and I'm going to cherish every moment of it, hence counting up. That's not our specific focus for today, but before we go on, are there any questions up until now? And again, for anyone who's joining us and hasn't before, if you have a question and you're muted, just raise your hand and I'll click the unmute button. Otherwise, we'll continue on. So Isabel, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Now, I'm going to introduce this next section in a purposefully tricky way. The law today, again, is that the Omer is still counted, and people count it, it's the first day of the Omer, second day. Once they get to the weeks, the custom is to count both the weeks. So, 2.5 weeks would be, it's 2 weeks and 3 days or 4 days, et cetera, like that. However, even though there's a formal blessing and a way to do it, technically speaking, if someone just says, oh, it's the 23rd day, they fulfilled the commandment, they fulfilled the mitzvah. And the only reason that's an issue is then, well, if they fulfilled the mitzvah, then going back and saying the blessing with God's name is like taking God's name in vain. So people are very careful to not count the day until they're ready to do it at the right time with the blessing. So the reason I'm saying that is last night, we counted the 32nd day. I don't want to say what tomorrow is going to be because I don't want to accidentally, have people count early. But I will say that whatever number comes after, we're going to have to read it inside. Whatever number comes after 32 begins tonight. And that number shouldn't have any special significance, yet it has become a minor holiday. And the question is, why? Why did the day after, well, I'll just say, everyone keep in mind that this is not your count. Lag BaOmer, the letters in Hebrew, Lag, Lamed Gimel, Lamed 30, Gimel 3, so 33 of the day of the Omer. How did that become a holiday? Why not the 22nd day? Why not the 42nd day? And what does that holiday have to do with all of the other practices of the Omer, which are these mourning practices I mentioned of not listening to live music, not getting haircuts, not having weddings? How did those two things become connected, and what's the history of them? So before, Isabel, before you read, Rifki has your hand up. You just have to click again to unmute on your side, Rifki. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Rifki. What's your question? Oh, you muted again. Oh, there you go. Yeah, go ahead, Rifki.
Tell me in the story, what is the Omar? What does the high priest wave?
Barley, literally barley, which is, a kind of crop. He takes it. It's not an
So
animal
you donate
sacrifice.
the barley? You donate the barley?
Correct.
And then
So
he
has like a
waves.
special barley he keeps to the side, like the special one, but he literally, it's kind of like on Sukkot, and they just wave it, they talk about Tnufot, they just wave it in the air, and that is the offering to God, and then instead of burning it up, it's just eaten by the priests. Good.
Last question.
Yeah, please.
What is Leg Momar?
So that's what I was just saying, Lag BaOmer. So
Lag Ba'omer.
you'll see it at some point in Hebrew, but lag is it's the way we say the Hebrew letters Lamed Gimel, which represent 33, and Ba means in, and Omer is the name of the season, Lag BaOmer. So it's literally the 33rd day of the Omer. So for example, last night we counted Lev BaOmer, the 32nd day. The day before that, we would say Lo BaOmer. Again, it just, in Hebrew, letters also represent numbers. But somehow this random combination became this day of significance, and we'll try and figure out why. Good. So Isabel, did I lose you? Oh, Isabel, excellent. So the beginning of the idea, so again, this Omer period goes back to the Torah, and after the temple, it was just, people would just count it. It was a mitzvah. The only significance was given by the rabbis, and really it's just a mitzvah until Shavuot comes. But at some point, something historically changed during the period of the Omer, and the Talmud discusses that. So Isabel, please, source number 1 from the Talmud Yevamot. Rabbi Akiva says.
Rabbi Akiva says, if you learn Torah in your youth, you must continue to learn Torah in your old age. If you've had students in your youth, you must continue to have students in your old age. As the verse says, in the morning plant your seeds, and in the evening do not let your hand rest. They say that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students from Gevat and Antiplat, and they all died during one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. The world was desolate until Rabbi Akiva came to the rabbis of the south and taught them. They were Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shammai. It was they who re-established Torah at that time. It was taught that 24,000 students all died between Pesach and Nazaret, Rav Chama Barava, or perhaps it was Rabbi Bichinia Barabin, said that they all died a terrible death. What type of death does this refer to? Rabbi Nachman said, death by choking.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Isabel. So this is clearly a tragic, deeply sad moment in our history. Now, to put things in context, Rabbi Akiva is one of the greatest rabbis. He's in the Mishnah, and he's discussed a great deal throughout the Talmud. So the context is that this is during the Roman times, when the Romans we were essentially a vassal state of Rome. We had some level of independence, but they were slowly taking that away, limiting our ability to learn Torah. It was a very dangerous time to be a Torah student. Now, the text on this page says that Rabbi Akiva had an academy, or he was learning with 24,000 students, which is 12,000 pairs. Is that number exact number of students? Did he really have that many? It's not necessarily important whether that's an exaggeration or not. And then the Talmud does say in other places that certain facts in the Torah, in our tradition, are indeed exaggerated. Regardless, he had many, many students, and at one point they all died. Now, the rabbis discuss what caused them to die. Now, the historical answer is that this is coded language. They died because they were part of a rebellion against the Romans. And Rabbi Akiva was martyred by the Romans. He was killed by the Romans for publicly teaching Torah. So that would actually be consistent with what happened to him if his students were also killed by trying to stand up to the Romans. Why wouldn't they just say in a rebellion they died? Because later non-Jewish editors may have wanted to quash any ideas of Jews standing up for themselves and, fighting in a rebellion. Regardless, that is the academic explanation, but the rabbinic explanation is that these 12,000 pairs of students, again, each pair learning one with each other, with another person called a chavruta, from the word chaver, friend, is that they showed no respect to each other. And as a punishment by God, they were killed. Now that's incredibly harsh. And I imagine, Jane, your father would have had a difficult time believing that, which is why many push for the idea that this is simply coded. But even putting that aside, it's a powerful lesson, how if we are not respectful of each other, Torah cannot continue. So even if you read this metaphorically, the messages are still powerful. If we, and this is true today, many Jews within denominations and between denominations who show no respect for each other, all they are doing is killing Judaism and the ability to spread Torah. So whether one reads this literally, which our tradition does, that there was a great death, or figuratively, it's still powerful. And the other powerful takeaway is that this was a historical moment in time that happened between Pesach and Atzeret. Atzeret comes from the word to stop or cease, but it also is used consistently in our text to refer to Shavuot. We'll come back to that phrase, but basically between Pesach and Shavuot, there was a great, massive tragedy that happened to the Jewish people. Now, how do we mark that? So the way that we mark that is, and again, the Talmud was codified between the 4th, 5th, 6th century. Then over the next several hundred years, the next generation of rabbis who every generation names the generation before them. So the ones who wrote the Mishnah they were the rabbis. The ones who wrote the Gemara called the generation before them Tanaim. Then a generation after called them Amorim, et cetera, et cetera. So the generation around the 9th century that we call Gaonim, and Gloria and Leonard, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. They now had the Talmud. They had this vast, incredible work of Jewish thought and law, and now they created their own academies, and now we're getting down to brass tacks. Now we have time to actually sit with the Talmud and figure out, how do we enact it? Which laws do we choose to live by? Because some of them are debates. So the Gaonim were incredibly important on the development of Jewish law, and many traditions were developed by them. And one of the traditions mentioned by them was connected directly to the tragedy that happened in the Roman times of Rabbi Akiva, almost 1,000 years earlier. So was this tradition in place before now? Probably. We don't know exactly when it happened. All we know is the Talmud was probably only finished, published, and available only 100 or 200 years before this piece was written, or maybe 300 years. So Gloria, if you would take this second source from this pre-medieval 9th, 8th, 9th century rabbi, and we don't actually know who wrote this opinion. It's from a book that collects a bunch of opinions from that time. So please, Gloria.
You asked, why don't we marry between Pesach and Shavuot?
Pause for a moment. So you can just tell from the question itself, this tradition at this point already exists. There's a tradition of not getting married between Pesach and Shavuot. Why? It already exists, and people are saying, why don't we do it? So please continue, Gloria.
Is it because it's prohibited by law? You should know that the reason is because of the custom of mourning, as the rabbis taught that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students, and they all died between Pesach and Shavuos because they didn't honor each other, and they all died a horrible death, as Kara. Since then, the custom was not to get married during that period. If someone did get married, we don't fine him, but if he comes and asks, we don't tell him to get married. However, one is allowed to do the kiddushin, the first stage of marriage, as the main joy is the chuppah.
Excellent. So we have a tradition which is still in place today between Pesach and Shavuot, which is coming out to not have weddings. And they add, if somebody has it, it's not, their wedding is kosher. This is just a custom. It's accepted, but it's a custom. It's not law. And the idea of not playing live instrumental music grows out of that. Because what do you do at a wedding? You play live instrumental music. And there's later customs that have been added on, like not going on trips, not getting haircuts. But fundamentally, there was this custom of not getting married. And he explains here, the source explains, it's because during that time of Pesach and Shavuot, one of the most tragic things happened in the history of our people, the death of thousands of students, which almost represented, and I didn't say this before, it almost represented the death of Torah. If all of those students had been killed, and Rabbi Akiva, who was killed, we wouldn't have the Judaism we have today. If the Romans had successfully killed all of our teachers and leaders and rabbis, our religion would not have continued. But Rabbi Akiva then obviously was able, it said in the Talmud, to find 5 more students, and et cetera, and it grew from there. Now, one simple historical thing to point out is, why are we only mentioning and questioning this custom now? As I had said earlier, if the Talmud source was code for some sort of rebellion that was being quashed and the ruling powers didn't want Jews to talk about a rebellion, it would make sense that the Jews would keep that story quiet. Internally, we would discuss it, but we wouldn't memorialize it until we were in a safer, more stable place. So it makes, and there's plenty of things like that. You know, recently there's been recognition, public recognition by the American government of the Armenian genocide. Now that it happened a long time ago, but now that there's recognition of it, now there's an opportunity for more formal memorials. So that's something that does happen. Just because an event happened a long time ago, it's not crazy that it could take a few hundred years to turn it into a holiday. Hanukkah, Purim, et cetera, like that. They may not have been holidays of the next day. It may have taken some time. Regardless, we have this custom that between Pesach and Shavuot, there are no weddings, and eventually it became, no live music, no haircuts, etc. I'm going to pause there because that's a major source for us to ponder on. Any questions up until now? And for those who just joined, welcome. We're talking again about the mitzvah from the Torah of counting the days between the holiday of Pesach and the holiday of Shavuot, which represents the harvest season. But because of this great tragedy of this great rabbi's students being killed, it's turned into a time of quasi-mourning. And we're actually going to jump ahead in history and then go back to look at a 20th century compilation of Jewish law, the Aruch HaShulchan by Rabbi Yechiel Michael Epstein. And he talks about how this mourning period actually has added significance because of things that happened historically during this time period we're in now. So Leonard, if you will take source number 3, and he says that this mourning period isn't just about Rabbi Akiva students, more happen. So please.
Days which are between Pesach and Atzeret have been considered for the past several hundred years by Israel as days of judgment and mourning. As within this short period of time, this short span of time, 12,000 peers of students of Rabbi Akiva died. As the Talmud explains, Yevamot 62b, and they all died of Askara. Furthermore, we see that the worst days of the decrees in the hundreds of years of Jewish life in France and Germany occurred between this time, as explained in the liturgical poems that the earlier rabbis made for these days between Pesach and Atzeret. They are full of mourning, lamentation, and woe.
Excellent, thank you. The Crusades that happened to the Jews, and in the 11th century and the 10th and 11th century, those were very much in a developmental time of Jewish law. And many of the poems that were written to memorialize that have made it into, when we remember the Holocaust, a lot of the poetry that we use there and the prayers came out of the Crusades. And what he's saying is that a lot of the most devastating moments of the Crusades happened during this time between Pesach and Shavuot. So today, this time of mourning that we are in right now with these practices, it's not just the death of Rabbi Akiva students, it's also the death and suffering of many Jews during the Crusades. And there are many other minor customs in Judaism that probably developed around the Crusades and then were somewhat anachronistically connected to earlier tragedies. The sad truth is that our people have suffered many tragedies, and there are a number of customs that can connect us to all of those moments in history. There are certain days that we remember Rabbi Akiva's students, the destruction of the temple, the Crusades, the Holocaust. Very sad moments. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av that we have in the summer, is essentially a day like that. But we have seen in this previous source in the 9th century, that is the earliest mention, even though I said the custom is a little older than the source, it's the earliest mention of the idea of doing any mourning practices during this time. But the thing that is not mentioned there at all is the idea of it not ending on Shavuot. In other words, all anyone has said so far is this custom of mourning of not getting married is from Pesach until Shavuot. So on Shavuot it ends. Yet we know today, and again, as I mentioned, starting tonight, this is not formally counting for those who are concerned. Tonight is a minor holiday, begins a minor holiday called Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, when people put aside all these mourning practices. People might get married tomorrow. They might have live concerts. Rabbi Dinan will shave his beard tomorrow. All of these things happen tomorrow, but nobody's mentioned it at all. So where does it come from? So we're going to look at the earliest mention of this day that gives it any special significance. It doesn't explain anything. It's just the first time that we have a recorded source, meaning that people may have known of the significance earlier, but this is the earliest source that we have for this day being anything special whatsoever, and it gives us no context, no explanation. So in the 11th, 12th century, one of the students of the great Rashi, the commentator on the Talmud, the Torah, etc., wrote a machzor, a book about Jewish holidays, and in it he included not just the prayers, but an explanation of all the customs of Ashkenazi Jews at the time. So it's an incredible work. And then in the 12th century, also in France, a young rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Dorbal, or that's how it's written in English, I'm not sure how he pronounced it, wrote, he actually added in a few lines. He added in some emendations, and some of them were just cute little lines that just added in, some context, added a custom here or there. So in a discussion of the Jewish calendar, I'm not going to have anyone read this. He just says, and Purim and Lag BaOmer always occur on the same day. Obviously not in like the same day. It's not Purim tonight, but just in terms of like the same, they'll always fall out on the same day in any given calendrical year. All that we care about is he mentions Lag BaOmer specially. Why couldn't he? Did he literally pick it just because it happens to be true? Maybe he did. Maybe for him it wasn't a minor holiday. Maybe he was just like, ooh, cool little factoid here. But that's the first time anyone mentions Lag BaOmer out of context. But he gives us nothing. So the first time we ever actually get a discussion of the Lag BaOmer that we are familiar with is in the 13th century in Toledo, I believe in Spain. And again, this is the first real mention of Lag BaOmer being special and explaining why, but that doesn't mean this is the first time anyone celebrated it. But it's very likely that if in the 9th century, no one talked about it, and now we're talking the 13th century, the idea of Lag BaOmer having any significance happened sometime between the 9th and 13th century. So I am going to, Jeremy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And I'm going to ask you to read this source from this book, the Sefer HaManhig, the book of customs, Rabbi Avraham ben Natan Hayarchi. And it's in the context of the laws of marriage, which makes sense because during the Omer, we talked about the only custom that we did have is not getting married. But go ahead, Jeremy, and thus is the custom.
And thus is the custom in France and province to marry from the 33rd day of the Omer and onwards. And I heard in the name of Rabbi Zarashia of Garanda, who found an old Sephardic book that mentions that Rabbi Akiva's students died from Pesach until
Pros Hahat Seret. And there's a reason I didn't translate that, as I'll explain in a moment.
Okay. And what is Pros Hahat Seret half? As it is written, one begins to learn the laws of Pesach 30 days before the holiday, and half of that is 15 days before Shavuot, which is the 33rd day of the Omer.
Excellent, thank you. So he is familiar with this custom. The author of this book knows a custom. Well, first of all, he knows the original custom not to get married. But then he knows that on the 33rd day of the counting period, that custom goes away. And from 33rd day, day 33 and on, people are allowed to get married. And presumably any other mourning customs, haircutting, etc., would also fall away, which is, by the way, one of the most popular. It's the custom my family and many in our shul and many Jews follow. But where did that custom come from? So he brings an earlier rabbi, this Rabbi Zerachi of Garanda, who says that the death of Rabbi Akiva's students happened from Pesach and then ended on the 33rd day of the Omer. It's not exactly what he says, but that's what he's explaining here. So here's what happens. On the 33rd day of the Omer, there's a custom that all the morning practices go away. Why? Why did they stop on the 33rd day? Well, this earlier Rabbi Zerachi of Gerona, I don't remember exactly, but he's around 11th, 12th century. So he's not, way earlier. So it's definitely after the Gaonim. He has a copy of the Talmud that adds in a word. A version of the Talmud that we all have says that Rabbi Akiva's students, this tragedy, this epidemic of death, of sickness, happened from Pesach to Shavuot, Pesach ad Atzeret, which is Shavuot. But there's a version of it that adds in this word pros, from Pesach ad pros ha'atzeret. Question is, what is pros? So the explanation given here, these last few lines, if they seem confusing, it's because they're confused. But essentially what it says is the word pros means half. And there's another custom that we start learning the laws of Pesach 30 days, i.e. a month, 30 days before the laws of Pesach. Well, what is half of that period? 15 days. So if we do that, we take 15 days before Shavuot, we'll come out with about 33 days. And even that math doesn't work out perfectly. But if you're like, that seems really confusing and arbitrary, it's because it kind of is. Essentially, a day of significance, day 33, became a custom, but there was no good explanation why. And even if they had heard some explanation that Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying before Shavuot, why specifically this day? So it's a little bit forced. And that's really it. After this point, after the 13th century, people just accept it. And you see later sources that are quoting and saying, oh, we have this tradition going back to the Gaonim, to the 9th century, that Rabbi Akiva's students didn't die on the 33rd day. No, we don't. We don't have that anywhere. But the problem is, once a rabbi in the 13th century says it, even if they're not sure where they got it from, and then someone quotes him, and then someone quotes him, then the custom is set in stone, and nobody goes back to actually find out if it's true. Is it possible that there is a source and we just lost it? Yes, that is possible, but it's much more likely that this custom existed, and the rabbis were trying to now go back and explain it without the proper context. Now, one thing I mentioned that'll also show you why this is not a good explanation is the word pros does not mean half. Not at all. Nowhere does it ever mean half. There are two possible explanations for it. If it is a Hebrew word, it means close to, which makes a lot more sense, meaning that Rabbi Akiva's students started dying from Pesach until right before, like Erev Shavuot. And that makes sense that God would end this plague before the holiday started. But it's also just as likely that the word pros is a Greek word, but it also does not mean, even if it's a Greek word, it certainly doesn't mean 15 days before. But regardless, in no universe, and by the way, if it means half, 33 is not half of 50. So nothing here makes sense. It's very clear that this is a forced reading, means half of something else. You do all this math and stuff. We don't know where 33 came from. And that's kind of the end of the story in terms of what's the source of Lag BaOmer. We don't know. We've accepted that Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying, but nobody mentioned that at all until the 13th century. And their basis for it is very weak and very flimsy. So the question is, do we have any idea or even a hypothesis? So nobody knows the reason why. And by the way, it's actually reflected. This is not, a heretical, a very liberal thing. There are great rabbis, the Chafetz Chaim, who pushed back and said there's not really a tradition for this, which means the custom of not marrying, not listening to music, not getting haircuts should be for the entire period from Pesach until Shavuot. And some Jews indeed follow that. So there are Jews within traditional Jewish law that reject this and say there's not really a source for that. So why are we stopping memorializing the death of these students on some arbitrary day? Now, the mainstream practice is to give significance to Lag BaOmer. And before I show the final source that kind of talks about the different customs, I'll share one hypothesis I read in a great journal called Chakira. The word chakor is to research something. And this suggestion is that the custom of not getting married made perfect sense. We have a historical moment, whether it's a key for a punishment plagued by God or rebellion fighting for the sake of God and our people. Regardless, it made sense to develop a custom of mourning during that time. But to not get married for 50 days and then Shavuot comes, so you have a whole holiday right after that, was too much. So the rabbis had a compromise and said, we'll mourn for this period, but at some point, after 33 days, after a significant period, we'll stop the mourning practices. It's okay. And we have customs like this where mourning is cut short because of holidays, other reasons. But then the custom was on day 33, we stop. But nobody wanted to write, we stop because it's too much. It's too hard for people to mourn this long. So instead, maybe someone developed a custom and saying 33 must have had some other significance. And we have some traditions. It was actually a fast day, and then other traditions that said a miracle. There was one source that said a great miracle happened on the day, but eventually the day turned into the plague against Rabbi Akiva's students stopped that day. We don't know. That's the most reasonable explanation I've heard, but ultimately we don't know. And this is the crazy cool thing about customs, is when we learn more about their history, customs can and do change. And there's a reason that there are often so many different customs. So this last source is from a contemporary work, Peninei Halacha by Rabbi Eliezer Melamed in Israel. And he talks about the 4 major customs of Lag BaOmer. And afterwards, I'll be curious if, as I said, my family's custom is from Lag BaOmer on, the mourning customs fall away. Be very curious to hear if anybody else here fits in one of these categories. So 1, the laws of mourning last the entire Omer period. This custom is based on the version of the Gemara that appears in our text, which states that rabbi students died between Pesach and Atzeret, meaning that word pros, half or close to, that's not there. It's just the deaths happened during that time. Lag BaOmer doesn't exist. It's no more important than any other day in the Omer. If so, one should follow the customs of mourning throughout that period. So that's a real thing. The mourning period continues until Lag BaOmer, 33rd day of the Omer. This custom is based on the well-known tradition that Rabbi Akiva students stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. Today, in 2021, it's a well-known tradition. But in the 13th century, saying it was a well-known tradition is almost crazy. The customs of mourning ceased on the 34th day of the Omer. This is based on a Sephardic custom for maybe our Spanish, Portuguese people here, according to which the Gemara reads, Rabbi Akiva students died until Pros HaAtzeret. Pros means half, that is, they died until half a month before Shavuot. When we subtract 15 from the 49 days, and you've all seen the source where he's quoting this from, 49 days of the Omer, we are left with 34 days during which Rabbi Akiva students died, and we observe customs of mourning. And then the final one he mentions, the mourning period lasts 33 days, which I don't know if it's the most popular one, but it's certainly, it's my family's tradition. It's pretty popular. This custom is based on a tradition that Rabbi Akiva students died on every non-festive day of the Omer period, which adds up to 33 days. Consequently, we must observe customs of mourning for 33 straight days. Oh, sorry, this is not the one. This is to mourn through 33, no matter whether they coincide with the beginning or the end of Sfirat HaOmer. And there's other variations, people who on the 33rd day, all the customs fall away, but then for the rest of the mourning period, they pick them up again. And again, the custom my family and many, many Jews, if not most, is 33rd day, the customs end the day, and then they drop for the rest of the period. But again, you see here, history, academic, language, linguistics, all these come together. And it's reflected in the fact that we have so many different accepted customs. This is why I love studying tradition.